Hey everybody, okay, so it's Madeline again. I am sort of doing this as a follow-on to the video I previously put out on how to do some masks. The reason I'm doing this is because since starting those initial masks and having completed a bunch of them, as I saw a change that could potentially help if I implemented it, I moved forward with it, gave it a shot, and for the most part they've all been good ideas and have worked out better, so I've kept them. So because you probably watched that original one and followed along with me on that one, I am mostly here to show you the improvements so that you can maybe implement some of those as well. So the biggest change that I've done is my masks now have a built-in filter instead of a pocket to insert a filter. And I'll give you the reason on that. So if you still are doing them the way that I did them before with the pocket, there's nothing wrong with this. The CDC is recommending 2 layers of tightly woven cotton, and that being sufficient. As long as it holds a good seal around your face, protect air from coming in that's contaminated. However, we know that these 2 layers of filter are essentially your filter. These 2 layers of fabric are like your filter for outside. So obviously 3 is better than 1 if you can still breathe through it. So I wanted to figure out a way to do a filter, and the big reason I've kind of decided to do that is mostly because if you insert a filter into this mask that we've previously made, and there's any gap between the seam line or the sides where it seals around your face, the physics of aerodynamics tell us that the air you suck in when you create the vacuum to breathe in will come around that filter, okay? So it's not gonna come through that filter just because your mouth is closer to the filter. It's actually gonna pull the air around the filter because it's going through 2 layers, not 3, so it's easier. So it's gonna go path of least resistance. So you're gonna end up breathing in contaminated air, or more contaminated air than if you had the filter that perfectly fit the mask. Okay, so in light of that, the real world, that's not too optimal unless you were like wearing a respirator or something and then you had a mask fitted around the respirator. That really would kind of be the only option. And these are not really designed to fit around a respirator. They are designed to fit around a surgical mask to some degree, but not a respirator. So anyway, unless that's your case, you really got to kind of do something different. So back to the drawing board, the wheels started turning, and basically what I did is I decided to take an attempt at using and making a filter that was built into the one that I sewed. Now, if you remember from the original video, I told you that that pattern included one for a filter and then one that didn't have the option for a replaceable filter. So I know that now at this point I'm making one that does not have the option for a filter, but I'm still using the same pattern pieces I used before. So I'm still using the pattern pieces for the filter insert, okay? And so basically the difference is going to be when I cut out the pattern now, instead of cutting out, do you remember how there was like a front piece and a back piece? The piece that was close to your mouth and then the main fabric, and the main fabric was like 1/2 inch bigger. Okay, so I am cutting both pieces the size of the main piece right now, and you'll see why later. And then I am cutting 2 pieces of a filter to fit inside of there. So basically, you'll follow the same directions that you did for making the main pieces. Like, for example, this would be like my main pieces. I did the 3/8 inch seam allowance. Trim your seam so it will, or snip it with shears or whatever so it'll lay flat. And then the same thing with the 2 pieces of filter. So let me interrupt myself right there, and I will come back to the placement of this in a second. But I want to talk about the filters a little bit. I am still using the same filter I initially told you about, which was the Filtrete 2200. I actually have the paper here to show you, in case you forgot. It's this 2200. This is the highest level. See, it says Elite. It's the highest level of their residential filters. There are higher protection levels of these in that same category, but due to breathability, I wanted to find the right balance between breathability and protection. So just a little bit of like side note, tangent information that I think can explain why I'm doing exactly that. Let me explain. So, all right, so basically when it comes to filters, now, okay, disclaimer, this is not me as a doctor, as an HVAC representative, as a scientist. this is me as somebody who just researched the crap out of stuff, and this is kind of what I came up with, and I'm gonna try to include all the science that I know about this while I'm talking about it. So, all right, so the way air filters are set up, they basically, as far as residential level ones go, which we are not commercial people to be ordering commercial ones. Okay, so the way residential ones go, they're divided into really like 3 categories of particle size. The smallest one is the 0.3 to 1 micron particle size. Okay, so columns, you know, you got like your particle sizes, smallest one, 0.3 to 1. That is the category that this filter falls into. Now, along the rows, you have what they call MERVs, and that's like the like rating of how well it protects against particles being taken in or whatever. I forgot the exact acronym, but it's like measure of something. You can look that up, MERV, MERV. Okay, so this one is a MERV 12. You can get a MERV 13 for residential use, and you can actually get higher ones than that. But even for a home HVAC system, 13 is really the highest that they kind of recommend based on my research again, simply because of breathability, because even your unit needs to be able to breathe. So in light of that, I stuck with the 12. This was the most easily found one for me anyway. This is what our Walmart carried as its highest level one in store. You could probably get a higher one if you went to like a Home Depot or an HVAC store or something. I did not do that. I'm just using what was readily available to me. It's the original one I purchased, okay? So it's like 22 bucks, but here's the cool part. This filter makes a ton of masks. Okay, also before I go into that, I told you it was a MERV 12. What that means is it is guaranteed to block out a minimum of 35% of particulate matter that is within the 0.3 to 1 micron range, okay? So you can go up to a MERV 13 and then you'll get a minimum of 50% blockage of that same range. However, for breathability's sake, I stuck with this. And also because I'm trying to help you guys, and this is much more readily available than a MERV 13 filter. And also because even this one is becoming difficult to find. If you can't get this one, do your best, use what you can. But in light of that, let me get back to the filter. So when you buy the filter, it has the metal grating all across, you know, like the little metal wire that holds it in place on both sides, and then it's surrounded by cardboard with glue. Okay, so what you are gonna do, if you have wire snips, cut it. If you don't have wire snips, it's okay, you can still do it. I had some and it actually didn't help me a whole lot because I didn't really know what the best way of doing it was at first, but you live and you learn. And so if you have them, cut a little spot in there where you can just start pulling it. If you don't have them, peel the cardboard edging off, because once you do that, that's actually more difficult than taking the wire off. So for what it's worth. But get the cardboard off, okay? Throw that in trash. This is what will be left after you pull the cardboard off. It's just glue with like a little cardboard. Okay, so essentially, I'm trying to put this up close so you can tell, but do you see how like as you pull it off, you're pulling some of those fibers? You see that? You can get really close and snip that if it's, you know, not a ton. If you do pull a bunch, those fibers are what cause the protection. So if you're pulling a bunch of them off, I would say don't use that piece of your filter, okay? Unless it's maybe like in your seam allowance or something, just don't use that piece, go around it or something when you're doing the pattern pieces, because you want the most protection possible. But use your scissors, try to preserve as much as you can. See, like that pulled off, you probably can't even tell this in the video, but it pulled off a decent little bit. I think it's still okay right now. It didn't pull off a ton. Some of the other ones I've done have pulled a lot. But basically, I have seen videos where people use these and they use like a pressing cloth and some steam and they'll press this flat. That's an option for you. I didn't have as much luck with that, but I also found that it wasn't 100% necessary either, so I cut it out. I mean, you know me, this project for me is about like helping. Who can I help and how can I make it quicker to help more people? So one of the things I've done is just cut out that step. It didn't help me a whole lot. In fact, I accidentally burned a piece of this. So note to self, do not put your iron directly on this. It contains plastic, which is part of the problem. That's part of why it's close to the medical grade stuff. But you certainly can't burn it, so it will take away the protection. So anyway, all I do is now, once you do that, you unfold this and It's huge. I mean, this is the original filter I bought, and I still have tons left. Like, you can make a lot of masks with one filter, okay? So if people want to contribute to your progress and your help, just tell them, like, this is a huge help, because if you're like me, you got a stash of fabric and you're willing to use it for the cause, but this is something that makes a huge difference that you could maybe have as a donation. So that's just my, like, tidbit right there. But trace your pattern pieces directly onto this. I just used a permanent marker. You need 2, just like you do for the front and 2 for the back of the mask. You're gonna need 2 of this, just one set of 2, okay, per mask. And so, oh, I wanted to mention too, that glue that was on there, if it's the big like cardboard dots, get that off. But if it's these little, where the metal grate attaches, you'll have little tiny dots of glue. I don't have any more on here because I have peeled them all off in an effort to use this quickly. So I would show you one, but I don't think I have any to show you. They're tiny anyway though, like this is one, and you probably won't even be able to tell because it's so little, but so like right up in there, the little tiny dot right there, that's glue. But anyway, you probably can't even see it. But don't worry about taking those off unless you just feel so inclined, okay? Honestly, like here's one I cut on a filter. You might be able to see it a lot better, and it won't matter either, and I'll tell you why. Like, you see that hanging off? That's glue. It won't change anything though. So the reason why is because essentially all it will do is once you get to this point, like I told you to do a minute ago, trim your seams and nest it with the main side, with the wrong sides together, okay? Wrong sides together, wrong side of this filter, wrong side of the main fabric. If you mess that up, it's not that big a deal because you're not gonna see the filter anyway, not that big a deal. But the only thing that glue will do is once you nest it and then you flip it right side out, like this, so that you can put the back on and then turn it. I usually iron it to make the seam look nice and pretty. And you would basically, it'll just adhere to the fabric. But I will say that even in the ones that I've washed and dried, like this one, it's been washed and dried, and it has not compromised the integrity of the materials whatsoever. But you can even peel the glue off of the fabric. Like, you can peel the fabric apart even if it did adhere. So it's not worth like worrying over. But yeah, that's kind of the deal with the filters. But they do a really good job. You can get a ton out of one filter, like 22 bucks at Walmart for the one that I bought. I don't think I'm missing anything. I did wash and dry this myself before I decided to send this to people. I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. I washed it on the hottest temperature I could find on my machine. And then I also dried it on a 60-minute high heat cycle. Did not compromise the integrity of any of the components, okay? This is Amazon elastic cord. That's why it doesn't match. It was all I could get my hands on. Cotton fabric that's been pre-shrunk. And then the filter. Nothing on this has been damaged by any of that treatment. So in light of that, just to finish off the pattern thing, you're gonna put these together, then follow the rest of the pattern instructions. So you'll put the wrong side, flip it inside out. The only thing I will tell you is that since I'm using this filter and it makes it pretty sturdy, I have chosen to do my channel for the wire on this piece, okay? So I don't do it on the back, I do it on this because it's got more like to hold it or whatever. The first couple I did them right sides together and then turned them because then I could encase the wire just in the front piece. You're welcome to do that as well, if that makes sense. I know I did it step by step on the last video and I didn't really do that this time. So I'm sorry about that, but if you do them, again, just to be more clear, so if you put them right sides together like this, like I did on my first couple I did, then you can, sew your 3/8 line to hold it together, and then sew your 1/8 inch above that, the line that's 1/8 of an inch above that as your channel for this. And then when you flip it, your wire is encased in just this top layer, like that. And then you would go ahead and do your back piece as normal. That would also encase that seam allowance within the mask, but like I said, no one's gonna see that, so it doesn't really matter all that much. It's just preference, I guess, at that point. But either way, I think it made a big difference as far as protection. I wore it myself for a long time and didn't see any difficulty in breathing. It was barely noticeable in comparison to the just 2 layers I had previously done, but it offered a lot more protection. So I hope that can help you in some kind of way to help other people. And And I think I have covered everything. When I finish these videos, I always kind of feel like, oh, I should have talked about that. But if you do have a question that comes up, let me know. I'd be happy to respond to it. I did this sort of in response to social media, because I've had like friends and family I know who are sewing these message me a few times since doing that first video and asked questions about it and stuff, and I've seen other people kind of inspired to do it, and they've kind of wondered, how do you do this or that? That's just kind of, this is how I've been doing it. I feel like it's an improvement on the way I last told you, but I want you to use what you are able to do and what you feel most comfortable with and what you think will be the best benefit to everybody else. So I hope that something I went over today can benefit you the way it did me, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. Let me see your progress, let me hear your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And yeah, go bless some people.